now I have the privilege of being able to introduce the distinguished members of our today's panel. I think we'll go in order and hear quick presentations from each of them. But first off, wanted to introduce Hayri Dayi, from the CEO of TeleKurye, Turkey. Each of our experts are representatives, are experts in specific markets. So look forward to hearing from Hayri. Thank you. After Hayri, we'll hear from Miguel Martinez, the Executive Director of the Georgia Tech Mexico Trade and Logistics Center, and for Brazil, Michael Johnston, an attorney at Johnston, Barton, Proctor Rose. Thank you.
Good afternoon. It's a very big honor to be here with the logistic leaders. I especially thank you to Paige and Sandy for this flawless organization and hosting us with the Southern hospitality. And I would like to thank you to Mr. Tarık Çelik, Chairman of the Turkish American Chamber of Commerce, and Adil Soyer, Director of Economic Relations, for their sponsorship and support where and what I need. I would like to start my presentation with a short movie was shot by the Turkish Investment Agency with the number 2008. It will help to give a general idea about the country, economy, and investment climate. And I'm gonna continue what does logistics mean for Turkey and why is so important. After that, I'll talk about some snapshots and numbers for the industry to tell about what is working right now for the whole country logistic and what kind of opportunities will be available in the next decade. Then I'm gonna finish my presentation, what possible products will place in the market stronger than the others, and what are the challenges for this. Could we play the video, please?
Merhaba. Welcome to Turkey. A cradle of civilizations and cultures throughout history, Turkey is now welcoming investors from all over the world. Turkey has a population of 72 million people, half of which is under the age of 28. Together with a considerable domestic market, this represents a vast and young labor force. Turkey is the 15th largest economy in the world and the 6th largest economy among the 27 European Union countries in 2008. At the same time, Turkey is projected to be the fastest growing economy among the OECD countries from 2011 to 2017, with an impressive average annual GDP growth rate of 6.7%. Turkey is the 15th most attractive FDI destination for 2008-2010, according to the World Investment Prospects Survey. And foreign direct investment exceeded $75 billion over the last 6 years. Turkey is the largest bus manufacturer and the second largest producer of light commercial vehicles as compared to the 27 EU countries. Its total automotive exports reached $25 billion in 2008, while total vehicle exports exceeded 920,000 units. Approximately 450,000 students graduate from 143 universities each year. Between 2003 and 2008, Turkey's foreign trade increased 186%, while exports to neighboring countries rose 278%. Turkey is the 8th largest sheet glass manufacturer in the world. From 2003 to 2008, exports rose 179%, reaching $132 billion by 2008. Of the world's 225 largest construction companies, 31 are Turkish, which makes the Turkish construction industry the world's second largest in 2009. Turkey is also the 8th largest cement producer in the world. The number of GSM phone users grew from 27 million to 66 million between 2003 and 2008. This is supported by an advanced communications infrastructure consisting of satellites, overland underground, and submarine fiber optic cable systems. Between the same years, the number of credit card users rose from 19 to 44 million, while the number of internet users increased from 5 million to 26.5 million. The country attracted foreign direct investment worth $75 billion between 2002 and 2008. In Turkey, per capita income is higher than $10,000, and GDP reached $742 billion in 2008. Turkey serves as a reliable energy link between Middle Eastern and Central Asian energy sources and Western countries. With more than 26 million visitors in 2008, Turkey ranked as the 7th most visited holiday destination in the world. Turkey is the largest hazelnut and apricot producer and exporter in the world, as well as the largest cotton manufacturer in Europe. Turkey is one of the most investor-friendly countries in the world. It takes only 6 days to set up a company, and Turkey has the most liberal legal framework in terms of foreign direct investment among the OECD member countries. There's more in Turkey than meets the eye. Turkey's potential and energy continues expanding in the new millennium. Join this exciting journey. Now is the time. Come and secure the future of your investments. Invest in Turkey.
Okay, thank you. Thank you. As you see, Turkey is growing very fast. First, I want to talk about the potential of the logistic hub as a country where Turkey locates. As you see on the map, Turkey is a very big candidate to be a logistic hub for the region. Its geopolitical location, connecting the continents, the cultures, to have energy corridors as a pipelines for gas and oil, strengthen its position to be a hub. Turkey is the most eastern country for the West and most western country for the East. And familiar to make business for 1,000 years, you know, for both sides. West meets East by all the meaning in the country. It's a bridge country. And with this content of reference, Turkey needs an innovative, well-planned, and with enough infrastructure, a powerful, efficient logistics system. Without this, nothing will work out in the country. Although logistics services are very new in Turkey, like 15 years or 20 years, the sector is growing very rapidly and very sharply. Standing at the crossroads of major trade routes makes Turkey an important candidate to become a logistics center in the near future. That's why the biggest public investment will be done for the logistic infrastructure till 2023, which is the 100th anniversary of the Turkish Republic. Okay, if we look at some numbers as highlighted, the GDP has doubled in 10 years, but the industry tripled. But on the other side, the growth of the share of the logistic supply is only 7% in 10 years. And those numbers signals us unrealized, very big growth potential for logistic service companies who will locate in Turkey. We can say the industry has grown by 20% on average in the last 5 years, and except 2009 because of the general crisis. The size of the market will be between $120 and $140 billion to 2015. Okay, under these circumstances and new policies and projects in Turkey, what will gain more importance in the next decade? We can say the combined intermodal freights will gain more importance than the others. And the public-private partnership models will be widely implemented, especially for the rail and maritime transportation system. While the ports will become logistic centers that facilitate combined intermodal transport together. On the other hand, modernization of the rail industry by $25 billion till 2023. And it gives a big opportunity, and we are expecting privatization for operating, marketing the whole system, the whole rail system. Public will supply the infrastructure, and the rest will be made by the private sector. We also expect complete the privatization of the whole existing ports and build the new ports by both, which is build, operate, and transfer to public back system. And it will be again by the private sector. And in the hinterland of these new ports, there will be the new logistics centers will be created. If we consider about to enter a small business entity to Turkey market, there are also possibilities in the Turkish market for those entities. As I mentioned, the market is unsaturized and ready for innovative, differentiated logistics services, especially warehouses and intermodal freight sites. And on the last, I want to talk about what will be the challenges to enter to the market. To transfer and adapt your technology, the way of doing your business here, into the local is always a challenge to adapt it. And on the other side, to understand the market needs, the customer needs, and answer them correctly is another challenge. And the last one I can say for the challenge is implementation your best practice, and experience is another challenge. And if you cannot achieve this, the hardest one is make a competition on the price level. But don't worry, there are constitutions already help you to enter to the Turkish market. Especially one of them is Turkish American Chamber of Commerce, who's located in Atlanta. They are ready, always ready to support you, to encourage you to enter to the Turkish market. And we are ready always to share market and make business with you. Thank you.
Sorry. Well, thanks, Paige, for the invitation. It's always great to be in Atlanta. I spent 4 years at Georgia Tech, so it's always great to have a lot of friends. And now that I'm working for this joint initiative, the Trade and Logistics Innovation Center is an initiative that we launched 6 months ago, probably, in September of last year. It's basically between Georgia Tech and Tecnológico de Monterrey. For those of you that don't know, Tecnológico de Monterrey is the largest private institution in Mexico. It has 32 campuses and about 100,000 students in all the campuses. So it's the largest coverage in Mexico, and but again, it's a private institution. So this initiative, what we're trying to do is basically support the logistics competitiveness agenda of our country. Mexico didn't have a logistics agenda until about 3 years ago, with the new government, which they actually realized the importance of logistics and its impact on the economic environment, both for internal purposes and also for import and export. So it's important for the Mexican government, and there's no institution or no center, or there wasn't any centers until we came about, that's really going to focus on country logistics performance. Everybody that is doing anything in logistics is focused on private companies. But again, if we don't really do anything in the country level, there's no opportunity for those companies. And where are we? I wish I had my video. We also have a nice video, but it's a nice video that you guys have. But I'm sure you can find it in the Georgia Tech Supply Chain and Logistics Institute website. But why Mexico? Mexico, obviously, it's the largest trading partner, one of the largest trading partners of the United States. We're right next to each other. And we have more than resorts, and I'm sure you heard a lot about crime. But it's a booming industry. There's a lot of industries that are booming in Mexico, both for export and import. But at the same time, if you look at Mexico, we are not very well ranked on all the indexes, the World Bank, the OECD. I think in the World Bank Logistics Performance Index, we're around 50 in the world. So that's not very good. We have a lot of room to improve. In fact, over the past 3 years, we improved 5 spots. So we're moving along in the right direction. Also, logistics cost as measured as the OECD, it's about 20% of the GDP. So it's double than the average of those countries, OECD. And at the private industry level, company-wise, it's anywhere between, the logistics cost as a percentage of sales is around between 12 and 35% for large companies. But when you look at SMEs, it gets all the way to 60%. So it's a huge challenge for those companies. And how we close that gap is obviously by education, by research, research that goes a lot farther than most people think of research, right? People research, they study and they have all these figures, but they really don't do anything for the companies. So that's what we're helping close that gap with this center. We're based in Mexico City, but we have, again, coverage all along the country. So what I wanted to share with you some figures as far as Mexico trade and commerce. And I think, yeah, okay. Just as far as, and you will notice some of the challenges that we have in Mexico logistics-wise, and I hope you can see that. On the infrastructural level, road-wise, we have about 370,000 kilometers. And I'm sorry, kilometers, what is it, like 1.6 divided by 1.62 miles. But once you go into Mexico, you gotta zoom into the metric system. About 370,000, but as you can see, only about 30% is paved roads. So you can notice there's a big gap there that we can help focus it in the right way for the industries that need be. We have about 27,000 kilometers of railroad tracks, 96 ports, and 85 airports. Even though we have 96 seaports, we have only about 5 major ports that can manage containers around the 2 oceans that we are divided, Pacific and the Pacific Ocean. So that's as far as infrastructure. As far as trade, and as you can see, our exports, $320 billion. If you look at the manufacturing side, it's about $255 billion, and that represents about 80% of our exports. Within manufacturing, we have 2 big areas in a sense. Automotive, which is about $72 billion, which represents about 30% of the exports that we have in our balance of trade, and non-automotive at 71%. So there's a lot more to automotive because a lot of people tend to think, okay, the GMs and all the ones that are coming into the maquiladoras there are the ones that are producing the most trade, but there's a wide variety of industries that are doing that at the manufacturing level. And as far as total exports, I mean, obviously, the United States it's our biggest trading partner. 80% of our exports come to the United States, and our imports obviously represent also a big chunk that comes into Mexico. So it's no question that it's of great importance for you and for us to be connected at the logistics level to increase that trade. Why is competitive advantage? We have 11 trading agreements with 43 countries. So we have, but as many of these agreements come about, they're signed, but there's nothing being done to increase the competitiveness of the industries that are trading between those agreements. So that's one of the areas that we're working with the Mexican government. A strategic geographic location, there's no question about it. The United States is still the largest market in the world, I believe, until China comes about, but it's still our biggest trading partner. In terms of, why is Mexico a good place to do business? Maritime shipping days to main consumer markets. New York, 5 days, LA, 4 days. And obviously that's important in logistics because now that the hourly wages are not, have leveled off with China, the logistics part is more important now than the, cost per hour of manufacturing, and because there's obviously inventory costs. So it's a competitive advantage that Mexico has over other countries, including Turkey. I see that. So, just kidding. It's not competition, I know. At any rate, number of import procedures, 4. Number of export procedures, about 5. So it's highly competitive on that regard, Mexico. In terms of population, we graduate at the nationwide level about 90,000 engineers every year nationwide, which is a lot higher than most countries. Our population is very young. We have about 44 million people in economically active population, and in the next 3 decades, it will get to 62, 64 million people. So it's a great pool of talented individuals in Mexico. And then as far as, and I think it's very hard to see here. Again, just some figures for you to get an idea. Number of procedures for opening a business, 6. Time needed for opening a business, 9. I think Turkey was 6. So we have some improvement to make there. And in terms of, as I was mentioning, the graph in the middle is, it's very hard to see. The top graph is Mexico wages, earnings per month in US dollars, the middle graph. And it has Mexico at the top, the darker line, and China at the bottom. And in 2008, that's when it reached the sort of the balance, and which obviously now the logistics cost and inventory cost it's more important, and that's what we have seen the influx of companies coming back to Mexico. A lot of people left. Many people claim that it was because insecurity, etc. But the reality it was more attractive to go to Asia Pacific because of the hourly wages. But nowadays that we're even level off, it's a lot more attractive to be in Mexico. There's people, there's and there's competitiveness on that regard. In terms of the hourly cost in US dollars for employees in manufacturing, it's around $4. It's around $4 an hour in Mexico. So it's highly competitive. The rest of the countries that are mentioned there are Taiwan, Brazil, Poland, Hungary, Czech Republic. So there's an advantage. And just to close off, just some, obviously it's not all nice, otherwise we would be very competitive in the Logistics Performance Index. We have a lot of, a big gap to close in Mexico. There's a lot of initiatives at the commerce level to make it easier to do business in Mexico. There's a single window now for export and import being piloted this year, so it'll be coming along in the next few months for most industries. And as I was mentioning earlier in the infrastructure, we have a big network of infrastructure, but there's a lot of challenges, especially in sectors that are the highest growth of competitiveness, like agriculture. We have major roads to the major markets and even to the border, but when you come out of the farm to get to that major road, it's a big challenge. So even though there's rail, the usage is very limited because of the conditions of the railroad, and it's divided between two companies. So there's a challenge. There's very little intermodal transportation, and then all the foreign trade barriers that we see at the top. So that's a quick look. I know we're limited in time, so it's a quick look at what Mexico is today. Thank you.
This looks like a tough crowd, late afternoon, so I'm the only thing between you all and the door. So let me set a timer here so I'll not overrun my time. My name is Michael Johnston, and I'm actually a private sector attorney with the firm of Johnston, Barton, Proctor Rose in Birmingham, Alabama. I'm a Johnston, no T. I always wished I did have the T, which means I'd be part of the founding guys from the firm, but I'm not it. Thanks to Paige for having me and being part of a distinguished panel. I figure if you're still here this late in the afternoon, you must have a lot of interest, or your flight or return trip's not for quite a while, so you're killing time. I have a lot of information to go through, and I'm going to try and go through it pretty quickly. There's so much you could say about Brazil that there's just no way you can fit it into this kind of a short time frame. We do seminars that are all day on Brazil. So in talking with Paige before this, I definitely wanted to try and focus on some opportunities, what challenges exist at the moment, and where opportunities exist, and really what is happening in Brazil. I mean, Brazil always had the saying of "O Brasil é o país do futuro." Brazil's the country of the future. Well, if anything, the future has arrived in Brazil. As of December, by all the different entities that sort of gauge these things, Brazil was deemed to have surpassed the United Kingdom as the 6th largest economy now in the world. So, and it's quite significant. It's always good to start with a map very quickly. It's hard to get a perspective, but just think of Brazil. It's a continent. It's as big as the United States. You have close to 200 million people now. So it's an absolutely enormous country, and given the size, and I don't know if this works, but you've always had traditionally population concentrations along the coast. Look at regionally, the southeast and the south, greatest population, and then also the greatest economic activity, basically the economic, industrial, financial centers of the country. But you're starting to see growth really all over the country, and huge needs for infrastructure. If you had to sum up a few things about Brazil in the last 10 years, in terms of, because of good fiscal policy and a lot of good trade policies at least, but it's been enormous growth and tremendous challenges because of that chicken and egg question of how do you handle growth, how do you promote growth in infrastructure, and do you do it, what comes first? Well, the growth has happened without the infrastructure catching up with it, and so that's where Brazil is right now. Huge demand that continues, and a highly inefficient transportation system that increases costs, inward bound and and outbound. And so Brazil has struggled with this problem, public-private investment, a lot of programs, and it creates certainly huge opportunities as Brazil tries to overcome these bottlenecks, and having an enormous country with huge resources and having to get those products to the marketplace or to bring products in without huge increases in the cost because of lack of infrastructure, and particularly because of logistics expertise. So just look at some of the top exports. And when you talk about top exports, you mean number 1 or number 2 in the world in a lot of these categories. Meat, beef and poultry, any given day of the week, the US and Brazil are number 1 and number 2 respectively for things like chicken and beef exports. Oil, by 2018, with its new reserves, the deepwater results, salt reserves, Brazil, it will be in top 10 worldwide petroleum production. Now it's top 10 in reserves. Soy, corn, oranges and orange juice, sugar, ethanol, automobiles and automotive parts, iron ore, minerals, airplanes, of course, coffee. So huge amounts of export and huge volumes. So what has happened in a lot of industries, particularly the automotive and the mineral industry and then in the aerospace, they've created their own logistics networks to deal with their supply chain issues. Now, a lot of the other commodity products that have had huge growth, there's been a real problem to catch up. Very quickly, in terms of trading partners, you get a sense of both on the import and export side. The U.S. is certainly varying. We've had a positive trade balance with Brazil for the last few years. Trade with Asia, trade with the U.S. and with North America, and trade with Europe, certainly significant. But the imports into Brazil have increased along with the exports. A couple of things if you start to look at the network in Brazil, and there's a lot of imbalance, but the road network, frankly, it's not a very good road network, and you have huge areas, of course, that are also underpopulated, but huge areas that really have insufficient networks. And when you start to look at, this is not a great slide to look at, but paved roads out of a total of 1.5 million, really 1.6 million kilometers of roads, only 207,000 kilometers are paved, and almost 1.4 million unpaved. Well, what happens when you have a road network that is not really sufficient is you end up with situations like this. So 18-wheelers on unpaved roads. And this is sort of unfair, but at the same time, this is actually somewhat realistic, although I don't want you to think that Brazil is a country of nothing but unpaved roads. But this is obviously the type of thing you have happen. So ports. Brazil is very similar to the U.S. in a lot of ways because its neighbors are at its back more than anything else. It has a huge coastline, and it has a lot of ports, but highly inefficient, a lot of problems in infrastructure in the ports, although it does have the largest port, Santos, in the state of São Paulo, in Latin America, but it's only about 43rd worldwide. So huge amount of ports, but in terms of ocean-going freight, limited to a few ports, although that's growing. Here is the picture in terms of an imbalance in Brazil's transportation network and logistics. It's because it's too dependent upon highway, and the highway network is insufficient. Rail, waterways, ducts, by that you mean as in ducts as in pipe, tubing, transportation, and everything from gas ducts, for example, some very creative solutions for iron ore, slurry, and pellets where you have to the port of Tubarão in the state of Espírito Santo coming through, you have a ductway that takes a slurry of iron ore pellets to go directly to the ships because it ends up being the most efficient way actually to take from the production and refining area to the ports. And that, for example, I supply quite a bit of iron ore reduced pellets for DRI to the US in air. But it's heavily reliant on highway. If you compare that to other countries, and particularly given its size, you see where that imbalance is. Well, addressing this imbalance is in fact a main focus of the public sector and where there are a lot of opportunities as well. And let me just say, because I'm not with an institute or I'm not, logistics is not and transportation is not my livelihood. However, with a lot of my clients who are both logistics providers, people in industry and on our M&A side as well, and infrastructure growth and investment in Brazil is where logistics is something that we do deal with quite a bit, as well as both outward bound from Brazil to other markets and the US, and with our own clients and the firm's clients and our work in Brazil, and investment into the infrastructure sector and also in the logistics sector. So part of the goal is to have a greater balance by 2025 through massive investment that is aimed at infrastructure investment and infrastructure improvement across the board. Highway, rail, inland waterways in particular, and air. Brazil has tremendous hydro resources that mainly due to a lack of dams and locks, it's been underserved. It's underserved by rail still, but there's large projects for north-south rail access, east-west, and other links. So really, and there's been a lot of, you could call it decentralization from the state of São Paulo in particular, the real heart of the industry. You've started to have a lot of industry, automotive in particular, chemical, petrochemical, minerals, that is spreading throughout the country, and particularly up in the Northeast, but there's a real problem in terms of infrastructure, transportation network from the Southeast up to the Northeast and into the Central and to the Northwest, the links that haven't existed. It's underserved by rail, underserved by inland waterways as well. So if you compare Mississippi traffic with Brazil, it's just phenomenal. But this is a major focus for right now and for the future for Brazil, inland waterway development, and that's across the board. There's some cooperation, particularly between the Netherlands and Brazil. It's an area of opportunity as well. The southeastern U.S. has a lot of inland waterway resources, and it's particularly where I am, it's very typical to have a lot of commodity products inward bound and outward bound, as well as finished goods that are through the waterway system. So also want to, I've got some websites at the end, but there's some very good logistics institutes in Brazil that I'm going to point you to for more information, particularly the ILOS that I've mentioned there. If you look at the international trade growth in Brazil, you can see the growth from 1950 to 2007. It's been phenomenal, and I know I'm actually already getting close to the end of my time. But it's been this type of growth in bottlenecks all along the way because of the infrastructure growth has not accompanied the actual trade growth. So a lot of inefficiencies and a lot of costs that will be addressed by the investment in the infrastructure and in the network systems. So transportation system, the challenges, in 2 decades of really very low investment in the public sector and massive growth in the export of commodities. The internal transportation network has had a lot of shortcomings. Cost of exports have been affected very unfavorably, despite good production costs and lower production costs, by the logistics costs and the transportation costs. Brazil is famous for the famous Custo Brasil. It is an area that still needs to be addressed. There's a lot of bureaucracy. Taxation is always a significant issue. A lot of delays in ports, things like that. So Brazil has a very developed system called despachantes. Truly, a lot of companies will have a despachante, not a customs broker, but it's somebody who shepherds your imports, your product to your customer's door. So, and particularly in the automotive sector and in the aerospace sector, it's very common to make sure you have somebody that takes care of getting from customs onto to your customer's location. So the public sector investment was greatly needed. From one report I have from December, a small number of companies that used an outside logistics provider, and which has been a problem. Now, it's being addressed in Brazil through the so-called PAC, it's Program for Acceleration of Growth. There's been a PAC 1 and now a PAC 2, the first and the second. The Accelerated Growth Program, significant investment up through 2010, and now with the second program, it's really going to address, it's got different axes, they're called in Portuguese, the eixos, but the transportation sector in particular, this is the forecast of investment up to 2014 and then beyond in the sector, highways, railways, ports, waterways, merchant marine. You're looking at a total of 140 billion over the next several years in investment, and it's really intended to create a multimodal system throughout the country. Inland waterways, better highways, much more rail, and to be able to take products from the interior of the country to the ports. The soy production in Brazil, it's also a world leader in soy, it doubled from 1997 to 2007. While you had the production doubling, you did not have the investment in the infrastructure keeping pace. So that's being addressed now to hit these bottlenecks. The US and the Brazil compete a lot in things like soy. Brazil produces soy with a significant lower cost of production than the US, but the transportation cost is 3 times higher than for the US. So ultimately, they end up with a higher cost, and the US has a competitive advantage because of the inefficiencies and insufficiencies of the logistics and transportation network. So that's what the PAC program is intended to do. A lot of private sector investment along with this is going to happen. Just yesterday, the Infraero, which is the national system of airports, had a public bid and sold concessions and rights to 3 major airports, the Guarulhos, the São Paulo airport, the Rio International Airport, and also Campinas, 14 billion raised, where they're going to give concessions to have private sector investment. But these trends, what you call it in Brazil, the trends in transportation and logistics right now, is really professionalization, is what you call it. In other words, there's a lot of huge amount of consolidation going on in the industry right now. Throughout Brazil, you've had a somewhat what they call pulverized system of a lot of small businesses and small providers of services who are now being bought up and consolidated. Either they'll be consolidated into much larger groups, a lot of foreign investment as well, or they'll fall by the wayside. And this consolidation, which has happened in the US, it's happened in Europe, it needs to take place. And one big aspect is going to be also a huge increase in automation and in technology. Labor costs in Brazil are not low. It's not a low-cost labor location. Automation in warehousing, in inventory, in fleet control, in GIS and GPS systems it will increase and is increasing, and it's certainly an area for a lot of investment and opportunities. Technology is going to have to address a lot of the labor costs, and it's going to be through the automation. There's been not enough standardization as well in automation and IT systems. Real estate, when I talk about the real estate market, in fact, there needs to be a huge increase in warehousing, in cold storage, throughout Brazil, and that's a big problem in the network, and they need private investment for that. That consolidation will continue. You'll end up with a lot of big players and a lot more competitiveness as well. There's a huge need for formal education and training programs in logistics. There's a scarcity of qualified labor and qualified personnel in logistics. You don't have the equivalent as you do in the US and in Europe in particular. So it's another very big area. And then inland shipping, the waterways are going to see tremendous growth. So everything from dredging programs, harbor modernization programs, port modernization, the link-ups in intermodal centers, vessels. There's a big shipbuilding program both for ocean-going freight and merchant marine, as well as barges, pilot training, all of the signaling system, everything else. Very, very large opportunities as well. These are the trends all toward a greater professionalization and a lot of bigger players, intended really to take a lot of the cost out of the Brazilian. It'll make Brazil much more competitive in the export and the commodities market, but it also will address a lot of the problems of inward bound. In supply chain management and professionalization, that is greatly needed. A couple of helpful websites you want to go to, both on PACI, there is a Brazilian Association of Logistics, the ASLOG, the Ministry of Transportation, so as well as the ILOS, which is another, it's a logistics institute. So that's a fair amount of information in a short time period. I do want to say thanks to Stefan Gruna, BLG Logistics in Brazil, who has been helpful with me in compiling some information. So, so I think that's probably my time allotted. Thank you much. I know I'm the last up for the day, and I wish you all well for the rest of the day. And Paige, thanks again for having me here. Cheers.
Thank you. I think all of our panelists, including myself, we did a great job filibustering most of the question time available. So I think we have time for two. So I don't know if there's any in the audience that wants one. Otherwise, I can sort of kick it off. Yeah, right there. Oh, there's a mic behind you. He is coming your way. Sorry, I didn't.
In the past, in Brazil, it has been difficult to get cash out. I know of a telecommunications company here in Atlanta that did a lot of work, took equipment, personnel, and then they couldn't get the money out. Is that still a similar situation?
Check. When you invest, what is very important in Brazil now is if you invest, your capital investment must be registered. You go through the Banco Central, and it's registered as your investment capital, so that it's very clear when you want to repatriate that. It has, in fact, it is easier. It is what Brazil has seen a lot of lately is short-term investments. That's not true structural investment, for example, or capital expenditures, but people trying to really take advantage on the short-term speculative capital because of the interest rates. So there's more control on the inward bound, but it is easier to repatriate capital, but you must make sure you do it correctly on the front end. But it is safe to say still that from a bureaucratic standpoint, let's call it, or just procedural standpoint, yes, there's still room for improvement. But it is I do want to reiterate, it is possible and easier than in the past to repatriate your capital. But you do it right on the front end, and that means have good local counsel as well and accounting. So.
Any more? Well, I'll have one for real quickly for sort of each of you. I think a lot of companies in general have sort of scarce resources, and when they look to expand their businesses overseas, really sort of have to try to make priorities about which country to go to and why. So just sort of real quick, can you guys say sort of why they should invest in either Turkey, Mexico, or Brazil? Yeah, go for it.
Yeah, there are some incentives in Turkey. I don't want to go deep, with the numbers, but there are regional incentives. There are sectors incentives. Depends on the capital of the investment. For further information, I can address again Turkish American Chamber of Commerce, because they are here and it should be updated by day and day. They will be happy to help you. Thank you.
Yeah, well, as far as Mexico is concerned, I think it's clear it's a country that logistically is close enough to the largest market in the world, and Mexico itself has a very large market, middle class, a very large middle class. So it's easy. It's basically there's a big pool of people. Talented people to work in Mexico, and for export-import, it's becoming even simpler. So I think it's clear from that end.
Same for Brazil. Over the last 10, 12 years, Brazil has almost every year been in the top 3 countries in the world for foreign direct investment, and it's been enormous. You have a market of close to 200 million people and significant and continued economic growth. So it's not typically looked at as an export platform. It is looked at more for the internal market, as well as an access to the rest of, particularly the Mercosur, Argentina, Paraguay, Uruguay. But it's the internal market itself. And Brazil is not necessarily an easy place for one as your first foreign investment, I would say, or to do business. It's more of a varsity playground. But it is certainly, for a lot of reasons, it is an attractive investment market. And one point, and I don't know if it may be also the same for Turkey or Mexico, but in Brazil, a lot of it, you typically need a partner. You want to find a partner or maybe an acquisition target where you have a good matchup. But it's not always a place to go it alone. A good partner is very often the best route.
Thank you. I think we're out of time, so wanted to thank all of our panelists for being here today and all of the words of wisdom. So we appreciate everything that you did. So thank you so much, and also wanted to thank all of you for sticking around late and listening to us. So thank you all for your time. We appreciate it.
And how about another round of applause for our distinguished panel? Thank you guys for coming so far. Appreciate it. If you go to our website, georgialogistics.com, and you can see a lot of the material, the videos and presentations that were presented today. For the most part, I got some permissions I got to get from a few of them. They will be posted online. All of the sessions were recorded, so you'll be able to go back if you weren't able to go to all the opportunity sessions this afternoon. You'll be able to go online and watch those. So those of you that weren't able to join us, pass the word on to the other folks that weren't here. So I'm going to close, let you guys get back to your day jobs. Thank you for coming, and we'll see you again hopefully before next year. Thank you.